Very excited to invite to the call. Oh, let's get rid of that real quick. There we go. Once again, good morning, folks, or good afternoon, or good evening, looking at the chat. Once again, I want to welcome you to the latest in the series of No Fluff, just free community webinars, and I am really excited about this topic. We've got one of my favorite folks on the call here, Mr. Raju Gandhi, and we're going to be talking about how to amp up your developer prowess. You know, we can all sling code, but what are the other things that really make us successful, that really make us more effective, that remove some of those impediments? So I'm really excited to dive into this conversation, and I'm going to spotlight Raju here and let him kick off. So hello, Raju.
Hey, Michael. Thanks for having me, and I am super excited about this session. I've been giving a talk on the No Fluff Tour on being an effective developer. And the most fun thing about it is that every time I give the talk, folks chime in and say, well, this is what I do, or this is what we've been trying. And I get to steal, someone else's ideas for myself. And the talk has grown so much that I have enough material to speak about for 3 hours. And that's a lot of it has to do with folks I've spoken to. So I'm super excited. I'm hoping that folks chime in. I have the group chat window open here in front of me. So let's see what happens. But yeah, looking forward to it, Michael. Let's see. Someone's already posted some commentary, so I'm already reading up on that.
Oh yeah, I see your comment there as well. Well, so let's start with this. Well, I'll throw this out here. You asked the question, chime in what makes them really, really good at their work. And I'll throw one of these right out of the gate. I feel like laziness is my superpower.
And I think Larry Wall, the creator of Perl, agrees with you. Laziness, hubris, and what's the third one? Impatience. Yeah.
You would have gotten there. I just didn't want to wait for you to remember it.
No, we don't have a lot of time. You're absolutely right. And in fact, something that I've raised a lot in my conversations is, sort of taking a step back, right? You have this idea of productivity, which basically means getting stuff done, right? So you have a to-do list, chop, 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 and you're productive. And some of the frameworks that are out there, like getting things done, tend to have a larger sort of narrative. So they say, well, establish your 5-year goals and then write to-dos that sort of align with those goals. Right? But fundamentally, productivity is about knocking stuff out. Then you have this idea of efficiency, which is getting things done quickly. Whether they mean something or not isn't the point. The point is to get them done quickly. So efficiency comes from manufacturing. Number of widgets produced per hour is a measure of how efficient you are. If you can double that, you're twice as efficient as you were last week. To me, effectiveness is sort of combining those two ideas, right? Being productive, which is doing the right things, and then efficiency, which is doing them quickly. You sort of combine those two and you become effective. But to your point, laziness is a great vector, a sort of compass to follow. But a lot of that baseline comes from having the ability to be able to standardize and systemize. And that's where I think the gap is. So a lot of people say, well, you can't be effective at everything. And that's true. The idea isn't to be effective at everything. A lot of things in life, you just mostly have to get done. And some of them you have to be efficient at. Effectiveness is a small sliver that you only apply to that really, really matters, right? So for example, I run a small company. We have to do invoices every 2 weeks or 4 weeks. If I can find a way to build an Excel spreadsheet or log my time for clients in a standardized way, then I can go to your approach and say, well, I'm lazy now. I know I have a standard sort of placeholder. I can build automation on top of that. But that automation piece is well after you figured out every nook and cranny, every outlier, before you get to the effectiveness part, right? But yeah, absolutely. So I think laziness is a great sort of compass to follow to become effective.
And well, one comment to that point was, and I don't know if this story is apocryphal or not. You know how these things go, but one thing that has popped up in the past is this story of an efficiency expert was brought into a factory, into an assembly line, and so as they're kind of doing the introductory meeting, the manager who hired the efficiency expert said, "All right, let me take you to my most productive employees," and the efficiency expert said, "No, I don't care about them. Take me to your laziest employee." And they studied these individuals, and the quote unquote most productive employee was running around doing all these things, working at a very high pace, and the lazy employee had kind of arranged everything in their workspace where it was all within reach, didn't have to stand up, sit down, move around, didn't take 2 steps, and it was, and up until that point, that laziness was seen as a flaw. But in fact, in these situations, it has proven again and again to be a benefit, something to be modeled, to be aspired to. And I don't know, I really relate. Maybe that just gives me an excuse to be lazy, and that's all I care about.
Yeah, no, I think you're right that the effective person has figured out what needs to be within reach. So somebody just mentioned Rich Hickey
Yeah,
and
hammock-driven
Jonathan.
development. I love. I'm such a proponent of hammock-driven development. There is a couch named in my honor at one of my former employers. It's still there. There's a
Oh,
plaque above the couch.
nice. But Rich Hickey actually brought up this simple made easy talk, which is a prolific talk. Everyone should watch that talk if you haven't watched it, and I watch it once every year. And he talks about the difference between simple and easy, right? To your point, I think that a effective developer knows a couple of things. The first thing, to your point, is what should I have within reach, right? Can I get to what I need to get to easily enough? So let me give you an example. And this is not false modesty. This is not me reaching out sort of for a compliment, right? But I can say this about myself. I'm at best an average developer. And what I mean by that is when it comes to like innovative solutions or creative engineering, I'm average at best. Because I've seen the folks at the No Fluff Tour. I've worked with great engineers, and I am at best average. However, what I'm good at is knowing where to go looking for solutions, right? So one thing I give a lot to folks and my teams that I work with is read open source code, right? Read lots of technical books. And you don't have to remember it all, right? What you have to remember is having read it to begin with. So usually when we are talking about engineering problems or solutions or quick hacks or whatever it is at work, the way I look at my role is twofold. One, whenever I'm working with a team and we are trying to make a decision, whether that's a design decision or an architectural decision, a technology stack decision, I don't usually propose an idea. What I do is I tell folks, okay, these are the 5 things I looked up, right? This is what I Googled for, or maybe this is the Stack Overflow question that I searched for, or this is the book I reached out for, right? Why don't you do that? And then come back and let's talk about what you found, what you liked, the pros and cons, right? So my first role that I believe in is a good, effective developer doesn't need to know the APIs and internal workings of everything that they use on a day-to-day basis inside out. What they need to be able to do is know where to go looking for help, for assistance, for ideas, for whatever. My second role in most meetings that or decision-making meetings that I've attended is to be the guy who goes to the whiteboard and writes your first idea is your worst idea. Because what that does is if you go with that assumption in, yes, you might have a great idea. And invariably what happens with teams is that you have a team of 5 people and there is one person who's opinionated or more vocal than the others. And they lay something on the table, everybody else nods and they move on and they make a decision. But that's not a decision. That's someone telling you what to do. So by sort of bringing all this together, right, having the ability to know how, or the experience to know where to go looking, how to go looking about it, where to search for, and realizing that no matter what you come up with, there are trade-offs, right? There's a pro and a con. And if everyone in the team is as educated as you are on that particular subject, people can have a good discussion to figure out what a potential solution should be. So that's just one of the techniques I bring up when I'm talking in my presentation is, what are your Google skills like? How good are your Google skills? I tell people to rank themselves on Google skills. So Michael, I'll ask you, how good do you think your Google skills are? On a scale of 1 to 10.
I use Bing because I'm mad at Google for canceling Google Inbox. So that means that I'd rather not find what I'm looking for than use their products. That's how mad I am. But reasonable. I mean, that's I can find the answer to just about anything relatively quickly, and my Googling skills are informed by the fact that I believe that everybody in the world is smarter than I am. Now, I'm going to qualify that, of course, but whatever I'm about to try to do, statistically speaking, somebody's already done it, and statistically speaking, somebody's already done it and screwed it up, and then fixed it, and then somebody looked at it and said, "You should have done that this way," and so I try to short circuit that entire process and find that well-trodden path. And I think in one of my talks, I talk about the 3 tools of a software engineer. So there's I don't think he's very active anymore, but there was a snarky tech blogger named Ted DeZuba, and he kept his own blog of the early aughts working in Silicon Valley and just that kind of interesting cultural microcosm that it is. And he was also kind of a snarky writer for the Register. If you've ever followed that, you know their style of writing. But he wrote an article, and I will caution you, if you want to go look this up, his writing is not what I would consider to be safe for work. He is very blunt and opinionated. That's why I enjoy it, but your mileage may vary. But he wrote an article called "The 3 Tools of the Software Engineer," and he defined the 3 tools as such: time, money, and code. Money, time, and code, sorry, in that order. And he says order matters because, he says that money is a great way to solve technical problems because it doesn't require writing code, which brings all of its own baggage. Somebody has to design it, monitor it, test it, profile it, deploy it, maintain it, etc. And sometimes you can just throw money at the problem, particularly with performance issues, scalability issues. Sometimes you can just throw money at the problem. But he does concede that money can't solve every problem, and also most companies don't have an infinite budget. But if you do happen to work for a company with an infinite budget, let me know, because I might be interested in a long-term consulting gig. The great thing about consulting, by the way, is that one thing I've learned is if you can't be part of the solution, there's still a lot of money to be made being part of the problem. The second tool that he outlines is time. And this is kind of to my point, to Googling. Sometimes what's the saying, minutes of, days of programming can save minutes of planning. Maybe days of programming can save minutes of Googling. And Mark, we'll do it. We'll set up a little practice. And so sometimes you can just invest time to research existing pieces of functionality that do. And we live in this golden age now where most of the problems that we've run into have not only been solved, they've been solved very, very well. I mean, I can't imagine trying to run a complex distributed microservice environment without Kubernetes or something like it. And we used to do all this by hand, and it's insane. And nobody would do that now. And so, but also nobody roll their own container orchestration platform, I hope. But a lot of times you can time and look at open source, third-party software, whatever. And the third tool in your arsenal is code. And he says, I treat code as a last resort because code is a versatile enough tool that you can make it solve just about any problem, but every line becomes a liability. And now you own this. It's a monkey on your back for the rest of your life. And so he advocates only writing code when he's definitively proven that money and third-party software don't work. And I love the quote. He says, Postgres has never woken me up in the middle of night with a null pointer exception or a segmentation fault, but databases I've written myself have. And there's a lot of there's a lot of wisdom there. And I love this comment here. I'm a big from Jeff. I'm a big fan of the automation aspect of laziness. I work extraordinarily hard to automate with unit testing and other automation tools to make things easy. I work hard to make things easy. And Jessica Kerr had a great talk called "Shaving the Golden Yak," and kind of embracing yak shaving, and that one mantra she shared was, if I have to do something all the time, then I should never have to do it.
So I'm not that much of a proponent, and I'll tell you why. Don't get me wrong, I love automation. That's essentially my job at almost all of my clients. But I think there's an XKCD comic which says, that you spend like a task that should have taken you 3 minutes, you spend like 3 weeks automating, and then just the reason I say this is that I feel there's a stack here. You need to be able to systemize, standardize, and then automate. I feel that a lot of people jump this bandwagon of automation without realizing that computers still can't think for themselves. And if you don't understand the problem domain, if you don't understand the tooling that is used to solve that particular problem, what you end up doing is creating more work, and invariably becomes the sort of Neil Ford commentary, right? Developers like meta work more than they like work. So they end up spending a lot of time. So I'm not against automation. What I feel is people tend to jump to it prematurely. And one point that you did bring up early on, which is the money, time, and code. This is what I tell people in my talk, right? Having the ability and having the experience of reading open source, analyzing designs in the open source ecosystem, just keeping an eye out for things that interest you, right? No one is going to ever read the entire Spring source open source repository. Like, that's just not a humanely possible situation anymore. It's just a big code base. But I'll give you a great example. If anyone's worked with Angular and anyone's looked at the Git log of Angular, it is the most pristine, beautiful commit log you will ever see. And what they did is they built out this standard format of commit messages. And from that, they use it to produce Angular docs. They use it to produce their change log. That's how you build automation, is you need to standardize first, right? The problem they had was, we are publishing the same thing in 4 different formats. We have an Angular docs website. We have the change log that gets produced on GitHub. And we don't want to do that all the time. So they said, okay, we will standardize on the Git log and then sort of build off on top of that. Now, I have taken that idea since 2014. And every team I worked with, I have pushed that single agenda. There's now a whole website dedicated to it called conventionalcommits.com. If you just Google for that, Bing it, conventionalcommits.com, it is a whole website with tooling that is based on that. So if you standardize your Git log, you automatically can do releases, you can automatically tag, you can automatically produce change logs, all kinds of good stuff. So to your point, somebody said it in the group chat, is you need to know the difference between yak shaving and not yak shaving. And that's what you were trying to get at, right? How do I know, can I throw money at this problem? Will it go away? Or do I have to solve the problem? And that comes from the experience that comes with reading lots and lots of open source And then you can look at a solution and say, that actually solves my problem. And it is worth adopting without having to build it myself. Or, I mean, I guess the point is, can you assess the quality of a solution quickly enough to realize, should I use it or should I invent my own? Oh, I'm sorry, it's conventionalcommits.org. Thanks, Jeff, I appreciate that. So yeah, so Eric's got a good point. Like, you can find interesting ways to create scenarios. In fact, now Clojure, Golang already have what is called generative testing, where the tooling can produce tests for you and catch edge cases. So, I mean, you know, it's not there in all languages. I think Rust has some support for it, but anyways, I'll stop talking. So great point, Michael, that money, what do you say? Money, time, and code, right?
Yep.
But the problem is figuring out what should I be doing, right? Should I throw money at this or should I be able to just build it? And the answer lies in the ability to assess not only the problem, but the solutions you have out there. And another example you brought up, which I always tell people, and you said it way better than I do, which is, how do you know even where to go looking? So I had this group of people who were doing Selenium testing, and obviously they were on Windows, and so they hard coded all of the paths to the Selenium drivers, right? Because Selenium drives your browser, so it has native executables that it needs on the path to be able to wake up your Chrome browser and run it. So they hard coded everything. They pulled me in, asked me to help me debug their, sort of improve their testing framework and put them on CI/CD. I'm on a Mac. I start up their Maven test and it fails instantly because the paths don't line up. So I go to them and I say, hey, this is not going to work. You got to fix this. They spent 4 days trying to figure out how to make Maven realize what operating system to use, where to get the binaries, where to download them, how to put them on the path and wake up Selenium. I searched for 3 minutes on GitHub, and somebody, to your point, has solved this problem, has probably done a few bad things along the way, and then finally come up with a solution. It took me 5 minutes to read their Maven file or POM file. I realized this solution will work, and all you have to do is clone the repository, throw all of your test code in a test folder, and say Maven test. Bless you. And boom, you're off to the races. You don't have to solve the problem. But if you don't know how to read a Maven file, or you don't know how to assess the quality of an open source project, well, you're back to square one, right?
And so a few more comments in here. Being good at estimating LOE is a huge foundational skill. It's too early. I'm not far enough into my coffee. LOE. Something effort is effort. No.
Yeah, I'm not sure what
level of effort.
Level
okay.
of effort. Yeah.
All right. Because LOC I know is lines of code, and my brain was just conflating all of that. And yeah, everybody's in there's like, we all know this except for you, Mike. Level of effort.
I didn't know it.
Well, then, so okay, lines of effort. Yeah. Well, we might just promote somebody else to presenter, and then we can. But well, let me ask you this, because I love sitting in your sessions. I love your style. Both in terms of delivery, but also slide craft, all of it. Everything is in depth without being overwhelming. But I have never had the opportunity to sit in your On Being an Effective Developer, because typically it tends to get scheduled against one of my talks, and so I've never got so. I know it's a 90-minute session, and we have about 15, 20 minutes left in this webinar. Can you give us sort of a breakdown of what you cover, some of the kind of key points?
Sure, absolutely. And I think some of the conversational points you brought up, and I think a lot of the commentary has already been touching upon what I talk about. I talk about what so I start with the definition of effectiveness and how I believe that applies to our work. I talk about things like having the ability to search well, the ability to communicate well, and I can that's one of my more sort of pet peeves. So I can talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. I talk about how to use open source, how to go about finding interesting projects, interesting tooling that you can try and adopt. I talk about things like how to learn, which probably is the most important thing in our profession, right? And not only how to learn, but also how to practice. It's one thing to learn a skill. It's something else to like put metal to the rubber to the road. And then the latter half of the talk is me taking those central ideas of communication, learning, open source, and extending it to the team. Like, how do you take these core principles and how can you make your team more effective? So, the example I just gave, you have a commit log, and let's say you are particular about how you write your commits. But if you can encourage your entire team to write it, now what you can get is automatic change logs out of it. Or you can do a better git bisect. I talk about knowing. A lot of the times the question I got was, how do I know what I should be spending time focusing on to learn to begin with? And the examples I give are Bash, regex, Git. And people who are, sort of singularly focused or are working with a particular technology like Angular or Spring or React or whatever, their knee-jerk reaction is, well, but we use React every day. And my take on it is there's a difference between being effective and being efficient. Because technologies move, right? But I can almost guarantee that regular expressions have been around for 50 years and they will remain for another 50 years. Your text editor, depending on if you use something like Emacs or IntelliJ or whatever, has survived your last project, will survive this project, and will survive the next project. There are some things that are bigger than a project, right? Typically technology stacks. Now, I'm not saying don't become a React expert. What I'm saying is if you are struggling to focus on what to study, what to learn, what to be really good at, ask yourself, how many times do you use Git commands on a day-to-day basis? And how many times do you struggle with it? If that is a stumbling block for you, what you end up doing is adding friction at every level during your workday. And so it disrupts anything else you're doing. But if those things come automatically for you, the ability to search using regular expressions, the ability to make your commits, roll back your commits, fix your commit messages, do rebasing, then you can just commit every time you're in a good place and then figure out how to clean everything up later. So what I'm trying to do in that entire talk is establish what I believe are the core foundational pieces of what I believe make me effective, which is, I just mentioned them, and then extend them to the team, right? And so Eric brings up a good point, which is, beyond learn how to learn, you need the ability to connect things together. And that's a great idea. There are lots of tools that I occasionally mention, in my talk. I do want to mention one more thing, how to take good notes, because that's important, right? It's part of your reach. How close is something to me?
Can I talk about my note-taking strategy?
Yeah, please do. I want to hear it all. In fact, I should stop talking and you also.
No, finish your point because I'm going to have to pull things up, but I want to show people this.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I was just saying that. I talk about note-taking, and that's a topic near and dear to my heart. And I've been exploring a new thing that I've been doing, which we can talk about if you don't have to, but I want to see what you have to say. Why don't you start are you doing a screen share, Michael?
Oh, here in just a moment.
Yeah, so let me see if beyond learn to learn, I think Eric's making an excellent point. Yeah, absolutely. The ability to transition topics is an excellent way. And a lot of it, in my experience, comes from having the ability to read docs and read source code. Once you sort of figure that piece out, you can start extending that. Emacs will survive a nuclear war. So will Vim.
Well, you know, more developers use Vim than anything else, right?
Yeah,
It's
probably.
because they
But
haven't figured out how to exit yet.
the idea is that I've been learning Vim in my spare time lately. Uh, so somebody said the Eric's brought up another point is have a failing test so you remember where you were. Wow, Jeff is very, very adamant about Ed. Nice, I like it. Uh, so Kathleen wants to hear more about your note taking, Michael. So I am very curious. I think lots of people want to know about how you do it. I will mention one, which is Roam, which is a new note taking tool, but it's not free. But the
Oh,
alternative is Foam. So somebody, I'll put in the chat message while you share Foam. Just Google for Foam.
Raju,
Uh, yeah, go for it.
take
Oh
a look at.
no, I said what you're doing. Oh my God, what are the
Yeah,
chances? That is awesome. I'm
I
so sorry. I didn't mean to steal your thunder. I
no, not
apologize.
at all.
I wasn't.
I am so unbelievably excited about foam. And so yes, to your point, this is foam. So foam is basically a kind of a loose collection of tools in Visual Studio Code to allow you to kind of uh, uh, make notes, create these sort of knowledge maps, and this is something that I use extensively. So I've been working on a DevOps project right now, and basically this is how I've been organizing not only my thoughts but also everything I'm learning, and as if I need to learn some new piece of tooling, you know, I've got familiarity with Helm but not Terraform. What I'm going to do is, in fact, Raju, I'm going to watch your Terraform recording from UberConf, and basically I take this very, very slowly, and I just kind of build these graphs of knowledge as I go through this. So I'm not just kind of writing down what people are saying or taking screenshots. It's, you know, I learn a chunk, I pause the video, and I sort of put it back in my own words, and I sort of structure and organize these thoughts using foam. And so what you get is not perfect. You can see in how the graph is being generated, but everything is in Markdown. I keep everything in GitHub, and in that way, I can you know I can kind of pull up whatever it is that I want, navigate either in you know, either through here or in, you know, anywhere else that I'm going. So so yeah, this is what I just showed you was foam, which is a somebody's sort of build your own Roam using Visual Studio Code. But anyway.
Yeah, so I'm actually a multi paradigm note taker. So I always have these on my desk.
Mm-hmm.
I always have a mini notebook in my back pocket, and whenever I'm reading or I'm watching a video or I'm studying a new technology, I don't actually go down to the form level at all. I take index card notes, and the nice thing about this is that there's only that much you can fit on a single index card. And then once you have that, each index card becomes a separate markdown file in Foam.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody earlier brought up the ability to connect dots. And I think that the dots you showed, the graph you showed, over time, if you can figure out a link between two completely disparate nodes, which makes sense, to me, that's wisdom, right? That's how you establish, it's not knowledge. Knowledge is the graph itself. Wisdom is being able to connect disparate dots and see a connection between how birds fly and how your Docker containers run in production. I don't know, I'm just making that stuff up, but the point still stands. Let's see.
I love this comment, by the way. I'm going to scroll back because Jonathan said, and absolutely, and I agree with this 100%, take notes as though you're writing a book, even if it's only for your own use. You know, because
Write your
honestly,
notes for your future you. That's the way I look at it.
yes,
Yep.
but yeah, but the reason is, and one of the reasons I take notes as though I'm writing to an audience, even if that audience is me 5 minutes ago, is because one of the things I've learned as a presenter is that one of the most effective ways to learn something is to teach it. And I know this sounds counterintuitive if you've never done it before, and that was one of the things I always loved about being on the No Fluff tour was basically anything I wanted to learn. I would say, okay, Jay, I would like to write a talk on this topic, and he'd say, great, I've got it scheduled in 2 months, and well, two things happen. One, I have a deadline now. And two, I have a minimum standard for how well I have to understand this topic, and that's well enough to explain it to a bunch of conference attendees who are hoping to learn something. And it really works, but that's a lot of time and a long turnaround. And so I write in the style that I'm writing a book or something instructional, because you get the same effect. In other words, you have to take this sort of nebulous cloud of knowledge that's starting to form in your head and crystallize it and build those links so you can explain it in prose. And it's a very tight learn, teach, learn cycle that doesn't take 2 months or 6 months or a year. I
I
also
think
threw a
that
link in the chat to a great podcast episode with Venkat on how we learn, and I highly recommend that to anybody here.
yeah, I think that teaching is one of the best thing. And for what it's worth, it doesn't have to be conference, right? Do a brown bag. And I talk about that in my effective developer talk. Do a brown bag with your colleagues. Do a user group meeting where the expectation isn't that high, that you're allowed to fumble and slip and fall. And everyone in the crowd is there to help you get up. And
They
I'll share
want you to
another
succeed.
resource with you. Yeah, I'll share another resource with you. In fact, we are going on a mini trip, and I took it with me. It's called Accidental Genius. And I'm sort of halfway through it. This book is about free writing. In essence, if you're thinking about a topic or a subject, what you do is you frame it in your head, and then you start writing. Just write whatever gibberish comes in your mind, as long as it's somewhat on topic. And what eventually happens is your brain will vomit out some useful connection, right? And to your point, Michael, it's not the very long, I need to prep for a talk cycle. It is effectively writing for yourself and allowing your brain to sort of just regurgitate what it thinks it knows. And I think the same thing helps with this. It's sort of like rubber ducking. If people know rubber ducking from the Pragmatic Programmer, it's rubber ducking with yourself. And I've been trying it out on a topic or two recently. I haven't gained anything yet, to be honest, but I just literally started reading the book like 2 days ago. But I really want to see if it helps, and if it helps my note-taking in form as well. So.
And I'm just looking at the chat here as well.
Somebody uses org mode, so thumbs up. Good tool. Org mode is pretty awesome. Oh, sorry, Accidental Genius. And then somebody posted a link for rubber duck debugging. Somebody said they have a voluntary in-team teaching to learn in front of this. Yeah, absolutely. And I highly encourage user group. By the way, I think, I hope that, let me see, I think it was Kathleen who wanted to know about your note-taking ideas. So hopefully she got her little demo. Yeah, okay. I think we're good. Okay, yeah, there she is. Awesome.
I knew that foam would be a tool that you were digging on. And in fact, I'm like, let me show you what I've been doing. Let me show you what I've been doing. And as soon as you said Rome, I'm like,
I've been actually, since people are so curious about note-taking, what I've been doing is, if you've ever used Notion, Notion.so, it's a very smart sort of quick, what was it, Access DB? Is that what the Microsoft product was a long
Yep.
time ago?
Yep.
It's sort of a way to take notes, but using Access DB like principles. So you can create like relational tables, and you can like, so what I do is there's a clipper, and what the clipper does is I can send it to a particular table. So it clips the entire article and puts it in Notion. Then what I do in Notion is I highlight the pieces that I like and I take notes. And then I take the highlighted portions and the notes that I took and I move them over to Form. So it's a bit of a process, but it gives me the ability to have the original article in Notion, have the pieces that are only relevant to allow the graph to grow in Form. And I learned this trick from, I think, Theo, I can't pronounce his name, Theo Gray. He's a person who created Build Your Second Brain. He has an entire masterclass on it. And that's where I think I got the idea from him. But someone, anyways, it's not my idea. Again, I say this in my talk. I have built a career on copy paste. I'll admit it. And you know, the best things that I've learned ever are from other people, and I just adopt them and use them and try and sort of mold them in a way that fits my life and my work style. But I really haven't come up with anything creative in my whole life. Almost everything I've done, I've stolen from everybody else. So, yeah. So Roger needs a webinar on note taking. Awesome. We should do that. That's a good idea.
Yeah, I'll throw one more tool out that I'm fond of, although I haven't used in quite a while, is a tool called Workflowy. Are you familiar with that,
outlining
Raju?
tool?
Yeah.
It's a really, really powerful outlining tool. In fact, Workflowy inspired Dynalist, which was another startup, and the founder of Dynalist went on to form Form. So that's the connection. So Workflowy, Dynalist, Form, and then Form inspired, sorry, he created Rome, and then Rome inspired Form. So that's the whole sort of trajectory there, if you're curious about how that all played out.
And let's see here, if I have this.
So Jim says he gave up on Workflow and went back to OneNote, and that's fine. OneNote is an exceptional tool. I would use it, but it's very handicapped on Macs. The Windows version is incredible, but on the Mac it is horrible.
On a Mac, though, I know a lot of people use Evernote and find them pretty comparable.
The thing about OneNote is the free flow canvas, which no one can replicate. Sort of like you can drop divisions and segments on the page. That's what Notion lets you do, by the way. So Notion is actually marked down under the covers, but they give you a UI where you can like literally drag and drop pictures and then put a table next to it and put a text column below it. So by the way, so let me just say this. I am not affiliated with Notion. I think it's a good product, but they have a free base model, but it is not free. But I'll paste it in the link over here. So if anyone's interested, and again, please don't misconstrue this. I'm just a happy customer. I have any affiliation with them. Yes, so Mark is absolutely correct. I tend to be very deprecating in my humor, but Mark is absolutely correct that I tend to, it's standing on the shoulders of giants. Absolutely. It's not copy paste. It's modifying what you see outside in the world.
Well, I will just kind of, I will say this just as a, let's see here. Aha. Speaking of learning, I want to take a minute and just talk about a few events that are upcoming. I'm most excited about ArtConf, which is taking place December 7th through the 10th. Now, one of the cool things, for those who don't know, No Fluff Just Stuff produces a number of events every year. Normally, they're all live events. This year, obviously, things are a little different. But we are doing 3 kind of general, broad software development conferences. The first one is actually taking place this time next week, Thursday, Friday of this month. We're doing one of these every month. And then we have our kind of topically focused events as well. And they are the Progressive Web Experience, which is all things front end and modern web technologies, from modern JS frameworks to WebAssembly to semantic web, all sorts of really interesting stuff in that space. Then we have the Tech Leader Summit, which is focused entirely on technology leadership skills for people who are moving into those roles. And then, of course, ArcConf is entirely focused on software architecture and the spectrum of skills necessary to be an effective software architect. Now, you can find all of these at nofluffjuststuff.com, in addition to our online interactive workshops, which we do pretty much 4 days a week, year-round. And you can access them a la carte on an individual topic, or you can sign up for the team subscription offer, which allows you to share that subscription with your entire team. So, definitely do take advantage of that. There's a lot of really cool stuff here. And Raju, are you diving into any of these topics at any of the upcoming events?
I don't think so. I think I might be doing the effective developer talk at one of the virtual sessions. I think maybe Progressive or ArcConf. I'm not doing them. Actually, I'm diving into some topics that have been piquing my curiosity in the virtual ones. So domain-driven design and Terraform and DevOps. But I don't think I'm doing the effective one at the regular virtual shows. I believe it's at Progressive or ArcConf that I'm talking about that.
And definitely the whole schedule is up, so you can check that out. And so in terms of the workshops, I know the one cool thing is what I like to do is go to a session and try to listen, try to comprehend, try to ask questions, and then go through it again and do my notes at a more exhaustive pace or a more steady pace. So in a 90-minute session, I might spend 3 hours, depending on the speaker and their cadence and information density. I might spend 3, 4, 5 hours really building out my foam knowledge base, building out those notes. And it was always a little challenging to do with No Fluff because we had the audio recordings and the slides, but there was context missing. So what I'm really excited now is like we did UberConf and all of the recordings are up there, not only of the audio, but the video and the screen share and the demos and everything. So it affords me the opportunity to really dive deep and study these things. And so I found this sort of hybrid approach works really well. So that's one of the things I'm excited about this year.
Oh yeah, and I think that the virtual ones, especially since you can get the recordings after the fact, and I've been just Brian Sletton, Mark Richards, Venkat,
Yep.
gimme, I keep listening to them or playing them on my, even if it's just playing in the background while I'm thinking about something else, it's sort of, the reinforcement message is, I think, very powerful. So yeah, that's what I'm super excited about.
See, that's interesting. That's where we get somewhere that you and I differ. I try not to do that. I try not to listen to things in the background kind of while I'm doing other things because I'm not really paying attention and I'm not really kind of creating those connections, connecting those dots in my brain because I'm not really focused. And I didn't really even think about this until I read this book.
Yep, that's one book I recommend in my effective developer talk.
Deep Work by Cal Newport. And I really like Cal Newport's writing style. You can tell that he's a professor because he not only just instead of just saying, "Oh, here are some ideas and do this, do that," he's got a formula for writing that is posit XYZ is a problem. Now let's look at the data to support this, and let's prove this postulation, and then what do we do about it? And I don't know. It really works for me. But somebody had commented on struggling with focus, and that was one of the. I'm scrolling way back here trying to find it, but because we talked about a lot of things today, but yeah, I'm going through. I'm going to stop. I'm going to my search is going to time out here in a minute, but yeah, but one of the points of the book is that is you want to create a space for for extended periods of intense concentration where you're hyper focused on a single thing. And the author Cal Newport also makes the case for downtime, that there needs to be time when we step away from this. And somebody actually mentioned this, Eric mentioned this right at the beginning of the session. Step away from the computer and think and dream about the problem while you do other tasks, mow the lawn, simple tasks around the house, etc. And then when the idea solidifies, go write them down. And I can't tell you how powerful it is to take breaks. A younger me didn't believe this. And I remember sitting in Daniel Hinojosa's Pomodoro technique talk. And one of the things that Pomodoro technique prescribes is you take a short break you've hyper-focused for 25 minutes, and then you take a 5-minute break. By the way, these are my Pomodoro timers that are on my desk. I do practice this. And I remember asking him, because I'd never heard of the Pomodoro technique before, and I asked him, I said, well, do I have to take a break? What if I'm on a roll? And Daniel looks at me and he says in his way, he says, look, you're a grown adult. You can do whatever you want. Nobody's standing there like over your shoulder mandating that you take a break or else. But he says, but do this. Ask yourself, if you're thinking about skipping your breaks, ask yourself, am I on a roll or am I panicking? And he says, if you're panicking, then absolutely step away. And that really struck with me. One night, it was 1:30 in the morning, and I was cleaning out a storage unit. I have no idea why I chose that timing. It's just how my brain works. I don't have any kind of normal schedule. But I got a text message from Pingdom that my app was down. I got another text message saying the database server was down. I got a bunch of alerts, and it was just like, oh, no. So I drop everything, go home, fire up my laptop, and sure enough, the VM that was running MySQL crashed. And I start digging around. I figure out, oh, somehow I filled up my data drive, and that crashed MySQL. And okay, so I gotta allocate some more space. Well, it's a VM. I can just attach, whatever, move the files over, fire it back up, but it wouldn't start back up. And I'm like, oh, permissions. And so I go and I grant all of the data directory on this new volume to MySQL, and then I go to fire it up and it fails to start. And then I'm like, oh, maybe it's not just change ownership, but I have to change permissions. So I change the permissions and I start doing other things. I'm looking at the logs, and logs are super not helpful. And meanwhile, my phone is blowing up, my email is blowing up. I have customers all over the world who suddenly can't access their data. And I'm trying to figure this out and dealing with this. And I don't understand why everything that I do, the database still won't start. And it gets to a point that I'm just like, root on the server, chmod 777-r, just everything. Let's eliminate any kind of permission issues, a potential issue, still having problems. And funnily enough, at that moment, my Pomodoro timer dinged, and I didn't even know it was running. And I thought, oh, well, I'm definitely panicking. And now it's like 3 a.m, and so, or whatever time it is too. And so I'm gonna take a break. And so I shut my laptop. I go into the kitchen. I pour myself a glass of whiskey, or your tipple of choice, and I sit on the back patio, and I try to think about anything but the problem, and just sit for a minute. And all of a sudden, a thought pops in my head. SE Linux. That's always coming and biting me. Could it be SE Linux? And so I finish my glass, and I go back to my laptop, and I sudo set and force 0, service MySQL D start, done. I can't talk about the power of breaks. Yeah, whiskey, water of life. Yeah, Jonathan's right. Stepping away when panicking is the most difficult thing. It feels so unintuitive. Fear acts like a magnet to the problem.
Yep. And yeah, I think that's a great story, because I'm not a big Pomodoro guy. I feel sometimes it interrupts me. But I think somebody said what I was trying to get at. There's a difference between deep working, when I'm trying to understand and learn something, and sort of reinforcing concepts. I think Eric brought it up. You can't listen to a presentation the first time in the backdrop. like that will never work. At least doesn't work for me. But it does work when I'm listening to it again, sort of like he said, like it's lyrics to a song. You can sort of repeat that. And there's a great blog post by the author of, she has a online course called Learning to Learn. It's fantastic. It's free. It's on Coursera or something. And she talks about learning math. And she says that the trick she learned was to be fluent. She learned that she just needed to be fluent speaking math to understand it better. A lot of people think if you understand something, you can be fluent at it. And what she said was, if you are fluent in it, it will help your understanding. And to me, that sort of is where I was getting at, is if I constantly listen to someone talk about a concept and I can verbalize it, I can keep verbalizing it to me till it finally clicks. But it's a lot of time and effort. Barbara Oakley. Thank you, Eric. Oh my God. Yes, that would have bothered me all day. Anyway.
And I know that we're recording this, and I don't think the chat normally gets included in the recording, so I'm just going to make a real quick pass through the chat. So we talked about the 3 virtues of a great programmer, according to Larry Wall, the author of the Perl programming language, and there's a website, 3virtues.com. And let's see, there's a few other things. Hammock-driven development is a talk by Rich Hickey. It's about a 40-minute talk. Thank you, Jeff. And then Jeff linked to, and then also a different Jeff linked to another talk, Simple Made Easy by Rich Hickey, which was the talk we were speaking about. And there's a link in the chat, but if you just go to YouTube and search for Rich Hickey, Simple Made Easy, or Rich Hickey, Hammock-driven development, you will find these. And then there's also a link to the slides here, but a SlideShare link that I won't bother trying to read to folks. And let's see, somebody linked to Let Me Google That For You, which is one of my favorite things. We also have a link to conventionalcommits.org. That's the correct, not .com. And we talk about 3-letter acronyms. And I'm just trying to think what else we've got. Google Foam, Visual Studio Code to find the Foam knowledge base. I think the No Fluff Twitter account also retweeted it. And then I tweeted something about it recently as well. In the last a month or so, maybe at Michael Card. I don't tweet very often, so it's pretty easy to find. Org mode and Emacs is kind of interesting. Then we linked to the podcast. If you just go to nofluffjuststuff.com/podcast or nofluffjuststuff.com, you can find Venkat's lifelong learning. And let's see, because we reference so many things here. Jeff G linked to Rubber Duck Debugging on Wikipedia. And also the book was Accidental Genius, Writing Generate Insight ebook on Amazon. Let's see. So we have a link there. Another link for Deep Work, which is on Amazon, Deep Work by Cal Newport. I'm currently reading Digital Minimalism and loving it. I'm down to about 45 minutes a day of mobile phone screen time, and it's changing my life. Barbara Oakley is who you mentioned, Learning to Learn, and some other great stuff. There's a great question here from S. Does anyone have tips and structure for keeping notes about research-oriented tasks, for example, when you're studying various new technologies in a new field where you aren't an expert yet, or to fix some impossible bug that requires a completely new approach and possibly long-term effort, including discussions and trial and error to reverse engineer existing solutions? It can be easy to do inside your head as long as the scope is small, but that way you don't share anything that feels obvious to you. But what about collaboration when you want to share your insights with the team members? Have them continuously fill in some missing blanks, possibly even including strangers to the process. I'm going to say my favorite tool in that domain is mob programming, and highly worth checking that out. Woody Zool. But we are at the top of the hour. We're actually just past the top of the hour, and I know folks have to drop off. So a lot of really great stuff. Raju, I want to leave you with the last word.
Well, I just want to say, great conversation. I love the fact that everyone stepped in. People were posting links to things we were talking about. So thank you for doing that. People have been talking about grabbing the chat. Somebody mentioned there's these 3 dots at the bottom left-hand corner of your chat window. And if you just click and say save chat, it should save it down. I just tried it. It just downloads it to your download folder automatically. So do that if you need to. And then for the person who asked about the research notes, that's a big topic. And I would recommend looking at Foam if you haven't looked at it, or Roam if you're willing to pay for it. But it's a much bigger topic, and I'm sorry we won't be able to address it today. But to everyone who joined, thanks for all the conversation, all of the links, the suggestions, the ideas, and hopefully maybe someday we can do a live streaming note-taking session, or just talk about note-taking as a topic.
I would love that. A good friend of mine who was hanging out, I believe, still in the chat is Josh Van Allen, who is doing a lot of live stream coding right now. J Van Allen 93 on Twitch, doing some really cool stuff with Angular, and maybe I can tap that brain for some advice on doing some sort of live stream note-taking learning process. I would love if that was something you want to do. I'd love to participate or even just be an audience member.
All right, well, thanks everyone for joining. Michael, I always appreciate you having me. It's
always appreciate getting sit down jam, folks. Everybody out there, thank you so much. Stay safe out there, and if you're in the U.S., have a great holiday weekend. If you're somewhere else in the world that also has a holiday weekend, enjoy it. Otherwise, just enjoy your weekend. But all right, folks, take care.